Good morning, everybody. My name is Samantha Mirabal with Melco's application team, and we're doing our Design Shop Talk today to see what questions you guys might have. I had a few questions sent in via email and on posted on the different forums, so I'll start with those. If you have questions, please type them in on the comments. Good morning, Tara. So type them in on there, and I will see them. If you see me looking off to the side, I've got a second monitor set up over here where I keep track of where I can read up on the comments and whatnot. And my dog is being very annoying right now, so hopefully he'll settle down. All right. So, good morning. Thanks for joining. So we'll get started on the ones that were sent in ahead of time. So on decorative stitches, can the running stitches be changed to narrow satin stitches? So you can create your own decoratives, all right? And with those decoratives, you can make them be whatever you want them to be. So, for instance, I drew this silly little flower. So, I guess I could draw it again. Why don't we do that? I'll draw another one. So, when you're doing decoratives, you've got to pay attention to where your start point is and your stop point is. Everything in between, you just want to make sure it's connected. So, what do I mean by that? So, I want to make sure my start and stop are on the exact same line. Otherwise, you'll see the design start to shift and drift and do weird things, which you don't want. All right. So this guy, if I just trace it, I'm going to start here. I'm going to go in here, and then I'm going to draw my flower. I like using column 1 versus column 2. It's a personal preference, and it's not a real good reason as to why I prefer one over the other. So one thing you'll notice here, I did my first line. The propeller is where the line ended. The green circle is where this one ends. The red X is where the green circle is where this element starts. The red X is where it ends. When I say you want to make sure things are connected, you want to make sure your start for the previous thing, so in this case, not a jump stitch. We want that to be a line. So where this guy ends is where we need this one to start. Okay, which means this circle, I need to move down to the propeller. Cool. Now it starts where that is. So you work your way through your design, planning it out, and in this case, it's a bunch of columns, right? So do another one. All right, I did not digitize that one very well, so let's fix it. That's a little better. All right. So again, what do you need to pay attention to? Where this one ended, which currently is where that red X is. Well, I can't start this element where that is, so I need to move it. So I'm going to move it over here. And then this guy, I'm going to make start where that one is, and I'm going to make it end over here because I want to do this guy next. All right. So if you want to check your work, you can always click this button right here, Update Auto Trims. And what that does for you is it'll recalculate it. And if you see a trim pop up in here, you know you have a problem. So for instance, if let's move this start over here. And now update auto trims. Notice I have a trim, which means this isn't going to sew continuously. If my goal is to make this a decorative stitch, you don't want to have trims in the middle of it. That's annoying. All right, so I'm just going to stop that. So you'll see here, I digitized each one of these guys, paying attention to where it stops and starts, making sure that my starting point is on this. And on this last one, I'm going to make sure my ending point is right. Oops, stop that. My ending point is right on the same line. Cool. So once you do that, notice these are satin stitches. I can then take this guy, right click, save custom shape. I like overwriting one design until I'm happy with it. So I just, rather than create a bunch of junk in my decorative library, I always write test. And that way, when it goes here, oops, this is a new version. So next time I save this, it'll be saved as test again. So now I can come over here, say decorative test. I can test it out and see if I like it or not. So, wait, that's not a really good test of it. It's not big enough. Let's make it bigger. Let's make our line longer. And notice it's a decorative, so it's doing all the decorative-y things. Okay? So yes, you can make satin stitches in your decoratives. Can you take a decorative that was digitized as a line, let's see, leaves, and change that to a satin? No, you can, but you can go redigitize this as satin stitches. So, kind of, right? All right, so hopefully that helps. Yeah. Decoratives are fun. I bought a design off of Etsy. I tried to save it as a PNG. So PNG files are images. I don't know why you would use that in Silhouette. Wouldn't you be better off using an SVG or a vector file in Silhouette? So one, I wouldn't use a PNG. PNGs are pictures, raster graphics. They aren't vectors. And can you show us how to change it into a cut file? So yes, I can show you. Let's go open a file. I've got this tree. This is a purchase design. It's a DST file. You can see when you open up these, they're all expanded. So in these cases, if you look at how the design was built, that's what you want. That's the shape that you want to create as a cut file, right? So what I tend to do is I tend to copy this. So select it, Control C, come up. I just make a new file and do a Control V and center it. Do I have to do it this way? No, it's just a bad habit. I like it this way because then I'm not messing up my original file. Honestly, that's why I do it. So I'm going to convert this to a wireframe, and in fact, I'm going to go ahead and operations convert to vector. File, save as, SVG. Did I need to convert it to a vector? No. Convert it to wireframe and then save it as SVG. So in SVG, this is tree. Good morning, Georgia. Tree trunk. Cool. All right. So now I have an SVG file of this that I can go open up in whatever cut software you're using and use it as a cut line. And I do that for all of them. So let's see the other shape. Where are you? Oh, that was a cut. All right, so let's turn all these, oops. There's another one. So I'm gonna copy that guy. New, paste, operation, right click, operations, convert to wireframe. And then I can do file, save as, SVG. This is tire. All right, and then where's the last one? It's gonna be the tree top. There's the tree top. So copy, new, paste. I don't like that random stitch, so I'm gonna delete it. Cool. Right click, operations, convert to wireframe, file, save as, change the type to SVG, tree top. Cool. Now I've got 3 files I can go open up. Okay, so yeah, that's all you got to do. Now, if you do this, if you digitized it yourself, it's a little easier, right? So all you have to do is save applique outline off, or just save this, save the step off, just like we did here. But if you digitize it as an actual applique, so what do I mean by that? There. So if I take this guy and I make it using this applique tool, all right, so that's now an applique. All I have to do now is save applique outline, and I can save it as a SVG, EPS, whatever format you like, and it will save that off. I would recommend a vector format. 35 degrees in Alaska, Lorena. It's 70 degrees in this house and I'm freezing. Anyway, although I'm in Florida here and I'm sick of the rain. Oh, I'm just over it. All right, so let's see. What else? What other questions do we have? Are there any ideas or some type of sample patches? I just started out and I want to do some patches. Any ideas on how or what to create? Well, why don't we make one your logo here? Let's do that. I didn't make it ahead of time, so you get to watch me flounder around. All right, so your logo here. Now let's do it this way. Cool, let's do that. All right, so how big is this? That's a little bit, that's too big. I don't want it that big. All right, so this currently is 3 inches wide, so a 4-inch patch would be cool. All right, so, although I want it to be a weird shape, let's add a heart. Let's add a heart. I just want a weird shape. That's really all I'm doing this for, is because I want something. This is really ugly. I'm sorry, it's ugly. But you get the idea. All right, we're gonna go with this ugly thing. All right, so I wanna turn this into a patch. What am I gonna do? So first off, I am wanting to do a kind of sculpted patch to kind of show off that. So let's go generate basting primer. I'm gonna go to primer stitch, and let's say 20 points. I don't like that, undo. Let's just go with the 50, because 50 is pretty. Object, generate basting primer, go to primer stitch, 50, okay. Yeah, I like that. As far as doing patch, since I want this to be a patch and not a stitch like this, I want to take a quick look at it and make sure this is something I actually want to cut, which I'll tell you right now, it's not. So let's turn this into a more patch-friendly shape. Tight corners, I don't know about you, I don't enjoy cutting them. So we're gonna go like that, so it still looks sculpted, but it's not as obnoxious to trim. Same with this. I'm gonna delete these. All right, I'm okay with it. Oh, right here, see that little thing? I want to delete all those points. I'm gonna select them all this way and hit delete. All right, I can get behind cutting that as a patch. All right, so now I've got a shape of what I want my patch to be. So ooh, I'm gonna delete that. Now I like it. All right, have you noticed I just modify things every time I see something? Sorry. So I'm gonna take this, and when you're making a patch, what are the steps? You need a placement, depending on how you're making them. I'm gonna assume you're gonna be cutting it out in the hoop. So you need a placement, a tack down, you're gonna sew your logo, and then a satin stitch. All right, so I'm gonna take this guy, and you can either convert, I'm gonna hold the control key down. So I'm holding my control key. So you select the shape, hold control, and click on this walk. That takes this whole thing and turns it into a walk stitch. All right, so that's gonna be my placement stitch. I'm gonna copy that, paste it. So how did I do that? Control C, and then Control V. I'm gonna give it a new color. And I'm gonna change that to a bean stitch. Why? Mainly because I like bean stitches for when I'm holding fabric down. It seems more secure. Do I need to do a bean stitch? No. A running stitch is probably fine. My personal preferences, I like my tack down of holding the fabric down to be bean stitch. So from here, what's the next step? Well, I'm gonna grab my scissors, I'm gonna cut out my patch around there, and at this point now I need a zigzag to hold the fabric and make sure it doesn't come up when it's embroidering. So I'm gonna again copy paste, give it another color, hold my control key down, control changes it from one thing to another, and I'm gonna say a single line, change it to a tackle, and let's make the width closer to 30. Cool. So there's a zigzag to hold it down. All right, then you're gonna sew your design, and then I'm gonna copy that, paste it after this guy, because the very last thing is gonna be my satin stitch, change it to a satin, and let's make it wider. Cool. Now I have a patch file. I see things I'd want to clean up. I don't like these little bubbles. But anyway. So that's all there is to it now. How would you actually make this a patch? So I'm going to quick center it hoop. Let's get a hoop that it actually fits in. And let's see. I made a really big patch. It'll fit in this one. Don't sew it in this hoop. All right, so what are you going to do? When you load the design, you're going to use the applique stops. I know I've covered that in the past of how to program those. But the first step, you just hoop your, I like to use a heavy plastic. You can use Badgemaster. You can use, we have some little tutorials in the Q&A section that show using a thick vinyl, a 12 gauge vinyl. That is, if you've ever gone to restaurants where you have the clear stuff covering up tablecloths or covering up their tables, that type of material. It's pretty thick and heavy. It works well. You can find it at Joann's. What else can you use? I've seen people use all kinds of materials, but you know, Badgemaster, Vilene is another water soluble stabilizer, which is the same as Badgemaster. You can use a tearaway. I like using plastic. So I use a plastic, I hoop it, and I run step 1. Okay, now I'm going to go grab my fabric. So I'm just going to draw, and you're going to pretend I'm laying a piece of fabric down. And I'm going to lay my fabric over that. And then I'm going to sew color number 2. So now what do I have? I have a rectangle sewed down to my plastic. Okay, grab my little scissors, which I don't have handy next to me. I like using those double curved scissors. You can find them all over the place. Trick I used a long time ago, which I still love, is I modified a seam ripper. I broke the tip off of it, so then I used the ball along the plastic. The tip now is gone, so it can't jam through the plastic, and I use the seam ripper to just kind of trace around. It's silly, but it's effective. So whatever means you want, scissors, seam ripper, if you pre-cut your fabric on a cutter of some sort, that's cool too, or a laser, any of that works. So what does that leave? Then you're going to end up with fabric now cut to shape, sewn down. So after that, you hit green button on your machine again, it'll do your tack down stitch. You keep on sewing, it's going to sew your logo. Let's make that white. Cool. And then the very last stitch, it's going to do your satin stitch. And at this point, if you're using a water soluble stabilizer or a plastic, you just pop it out of your plastic and you're good to go. Done. So patches are a ton of fun. I make a lot of them, but quick and easy. Pre-cutting the fabric does make them go faster. You can also use there's all kinds of sticky back products that you can use that you fuse onto your fabric so that if you're pre-cutting it, you can just peel and stick. Please don't put your fingers under a machine, particularly when you lay that big old piece of fabric down and hit go. Use some tape, use a chopstick, use some pins. Don't stick your hands in a moving machine. I have the scars that prove why that's a bad idea. Don't do it. So, all right, now that was my PSA of the day. All right, so that's patches. I know you had asked that I cover this next week since you weren't able to be live. We can review it again next week, but it's here, so I figured we'd go ahead and cover it. We did get a note to the applications email that they're working on this logo, and their question was, I'm trying to do this black box, and I want it to sew top down, and I don't know how. I can make the text do that, but I can't figure out how to make the box do that. So how do I do it? So let's look at that. All right, so first off, I'm going to digitize a box. I'm going to use the complex fill right here. I'm just going to grab the rectangle and draw a rectangle and call it done. Cool. All right, so if you go into if you're not familiar with text, what they're saying about the top down text footer. There we go. All right, so you notice right here, I've got this horizontal stitch order and vertical stitch order. So I can set top down, bottom up, center out, left to right, right to left. You can choose all those things when working with text. But if I do the same thing and I double click on this, go to the properties, those boxes don't exist here. Why? Well, because it's actually on the screen. All the info you need to know of how it's going to sew is already there. So the green circle is where this box is going to start. The red X is where it's going to end. The dotted line right here is the stitch direction. So if I turn it into 3D, I'm going to hit this redraw button so you can watch. So it does all the underlay, which is settings that are right here. And then it's going to sew in the direction towards the red X that was down here somewhere, and I forget. I can fast forward through this. So notice it backed up right here. All right. So let's say I want it to end at this corner. How do I make it do that? Well, I got to move my red X. So I got to say, red X, I want you to be over here because I want to end all the way over here. So now if I redraw it, notice oops, back up. Rather than that little backups thing it did here, make me fast forward through it. All right, it just keeps going and sews. So if you want it to sew from top to bottom, what do? Well, I've got my stitch direction. I can always play with that. Not that that's a good direction to sew in, but you know, there it is. And I'm going to tell it, I want you to start up here and end down here. Now if I redraw it, I've got too much underlay. Let's get rid of some of that underlay. Play. Hey, look, it's sewing from the top down to the bottom. Okay, so it's all about where are your starts, where are your finishes. So if I move those around and I say start down here, end over here, it's going to do weird stuff because it's ending on the same spot. So it walked up and it needs to end down here. Whereas if I tell it start here, end here, you'll notice it's going to sew bottom to top. All right. So that's all there is to when you're working with your complex fills or any of the different elements. You just pay attention to where your starts and stops are and think about how you want it to sew and kind of work through it that way. Hopefully that helps. Okay. So, any other questions? Let me scroll through. We got you a link on patches, so check those out. Can you explain the partition info or point to a previous video? So partition info is kind of this magic area that Nate has explained it to me over and over and over again, and I've read the manual over and over and over again, and I remember it in the time I'm reading it, and then I tune it out. So let me explain some of it. All right. So what this is dictating is from line to line, how are the stitches going to change? Okay. So it's, if I have 4 partitions and for each sequence, how the stitches shift. There is in the manual, he's got a really good description in there. So if you actually go look this up, he's got little visuals that show you what each stitch for the next row based on the number of this, what's happening. All right, so it's really just how the stitches shift one to another. Now you'll notice if you choose any of these, you end up with patterns, right? So if you zoom in on this, you'll see now, zoom in did not help. Zoom out, you actually see it better. You see that ribbing pattern? That's being driven by these partition things, okay, the angle, and you'll notice it changes. The auto split, the common auto split, is by far my favorite partition, not for this purpose, but for text. The 6 and 501, 501 creates a really nice middle split. I'll be honest, when I'm messing with partitions, I just type in numbers and look at what happens. Bye guys, sorry, my friends are leaving. But I'm sorry, I'm not very helpful here. I know Nate has explained it to me. I'm a failure on this one. But I will say, go read the in the manual. It's done really well. So he explains really nicely what happens there. Let's see. When doing a legacy design, the design checker shows a lot of things. Yeah, so legacy designs, one of the things you're going to notice, a lot of the underlay was done manually. All right, what do I mean by that? So if I go open up that bird, C drive, designs, one day OFM. All right, so if you go look at this, all of the underlay is manually done, meaning someone scribbled under here the underlay they wanted and then did the fill on top of it. Okay. Mad Q products. Sorry, I didn't give you a better explanation. Like I said, I know the numbers I like, the 501, 501, partition 6. I love that one. But yeah, I usually just play with it until I like what I see on the screen. Not a very satisfying answer, but that's what I do. All right. So with the legacy designs, so if I go to the checker, notice there's all kinds of issues with this design. All right. And it's not that those issues are actually here. It's everything was digitized manually. So really, I mean, you can go add all underlay and change all these things, but yeah, I wouldn't. I would just sew it, and if it sews, great. But yeah, you can't really rely on the checker when it's all done manually like this, because it's looking at the properties and going, hey, this fill has no underlay. You can see that, none, none. It's not a very good practice. You should have underlay. So the design checker is going to give you an error, but the reality is someone digitized a manual underlay as a running stitch underneath it. Okay, so when you're dealing with legacy designs, you got to be a little bit smart about it and think, look through it. If it tells you there's an error, take a look at it and see, is it really an error? Yes, this one element has no underlay, but if I look below it, someone digitized an underlay, so I don't really need to worry about it. Okay. Let's see. Scanning through the comments, see if I missed any other questions. No. All right. Well, what else did you guys want to learn about today? Anything fun? We did patches. I always like talking about patches. Nothing? Because I don't have any more questions, so I'm done. Unless you guys have stuff you want to chat about. Trying to think what's anything else I saw online this week. I don't think so. All right, y'all. Well, have a fantastic weekend. I'll be back next week. Same Design Shop Talk. See, if you've got questions, you can always email applications@melco. You can type them in on these while we're live. You can always send them in. On Facebook, I tend to post in a handful of groups day to 2 days before we do the live, looking for questions and polling for them. So as kind of a reminder, hey, send me your questions. All right. Otherwise, not much to talk about. We've got a tropical storm, I guess, or something in the waters headed our way. I'm a true Florida person. I don't pay any attention to them. So all I know is it's lots of rain, and I'm done with the rain. So that's about as far as I got with it. Well, you guys have a fantastic weekend. I will talk to you guys next week. Have fun sewing, and go see what my machines are doing. Make some more noise out there. All right. So I will talk to you next week. Bye, everyone.